Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hello Velocity podcast, where we help corporate women level up without burning out. I'm your host, Brittany Kamaski, leadership coach and trainer here at Hello Velocity. And today we're joined by Leah Marone to talk about stress, anxiety, and serial fixers. Leah Marone is a psychotherapist, Yale clinical instructor, and corporate mental wellness consultant with over 20 years of experience. A former Division I athlete, she specializes in high achievers struggling with imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and performance anxiety. Everyone raise your hand right now. That is all of us for sure. She works with organizations on burnout prevention, boundary setting, and emotional intelligence. A sought-after speaker, Leah has presented her Support, Don't Solve framework to leaders nationwide, and her new book, Serial Fixer. It explores the hidden patterns of overfunctioning and how to break free. Welcome, Leah. We're so excited to learn from you today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I can't wait for a conversation.
Yes, I know. And even just reading your bio again, I'm like, all of these topics are really hot topics with myself, my clients, and they come up all the time. So I'm really excited to hear from your perspective. And yeah, let's get started. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey. It sounds interesting going from, Division I athlete, and I'm sure you're bringing some of that into your teachings today, but how have you gotten into the space of, teaching different people in corporate and how to manage stress and burnout?
Yeah. Well, and like you said, I mean, it's a thing. It's such a theme, and you see it in every corner of life, right? Not just even in corporate America, but we see it in parenting. We see it in just, a lot of just over functioning happening left and right. And you make a great point about, do you kind of bring kind of your athletic background into your clinical work? And absolutely. And I'm really keen on the word reps, right? And so when we think about reps and getting your reps in, I mean, I first and foremost, my mind goes to the gym, or my mind goes to when I was lifting weights and when I was doing things athletically, you get your reps in to build that mind-body connection. And I really like to, transfer that to not just physical health, but emotional and mental health too. Because, I think when it comes to our self-connection, our self-trust, and, implementing healthy boundaries and sustaining healthy boundaries, it really does have to, do with getting those repetitions in and carving out that consistent space for ourselves. And ultimately, that really is what self-care is about.
Wow. Yeah, I noticed that in your book too, that you were mentioning reps, and there's a lot of workout metaphors, which I love too, because I actually use the same metaphor with my clients too when I'm first bringing someone on, is that coaching is like working with someone at the gym. It's like I'm the trainer, but I'm not the one doing the reps, and I'm not the one that has to eat healthy between the sessions. Like there's a lot on your plate that you're responsible for. And I use the rep metaphor too of like your muscles of like, all right, you're not going to be able to change your habits overnight, but you need to start somewhere and work your way up, and it's probably going to be painful at first, and that's normal. That's okay. So it's such a great metaphor for all of what we're doing. When it comes to stress and anxiety, what do you see as the big differentiators there?
Yeah. Well, stress and anxiety, they do have a lot of similar symptoms, right? I mean, it's like we can feel them physically, muscle tension. We can feel, changes in our breath and our body temperature. And then emotionally, mentally, our patience kind of wears very thin. Our ability sometimes to pay attention, to stay present, stress, anxiety, it does. It kind of has a lot of similar themes and alarm bells, if you will, that kind of go off mentally, emotionally, and physically. But I think the real big differentiator to highlight is that, stress is something that we can typically pinpoint with an external trigger. It's that, difficult call that's coming up this afternoon. It's that project that you've been working on a month that, the deadline is here tomorrow. It's just a strain in a relationship where, you might both be avoiding a conversation. There's generally this external thing that you can put your finger on. And it could be, compiled with other things, but that's generally stress. And it's a normal thing, right? Because as humans, we love control to a certain extent, but we don't have a lot of it. And so life is going to throw us curveballs all the time. And, we know that logically, but emotionally, that's hard to swallow. Anxiety and anxious thoughts, on the other hand, are internal things, right? It's how we are processing information and the data that we're collecting. And generally anxiety, kind of our patterning and our filtration system and how we are, again, kind of processing this information, it is based a lot on what was modeled for us, right? The kind of environment that we grew up in, and we kind of have that nature nurture combination. And so just even that point of some of us were modeled healthy ways to handle stress. Some of us were modeled by our caregivers, just ignore it and put band-aids and, things on top of it, or kind of let your internal balloon get really big and pop and then regroup. So we were all modeled very different things. And therefore we're all starting from very different places when it comes to emotional regulation. And so I do think, anxiety, again, internal, how we're processing, the stories we tell ourselves, kind of the rigid thinking, and, things like that keep us sometimes trapped and stagnant. And again, stress is the external one. And just to highlight too, and then I'll pause, but I think anxiety also gets such a bad rap. Anxiety too, anxious thoughts, they get such a bad rap. And we really, if you think about it, that is really our alarm system. When we are in anxious thought patterns, we are stuck in futuristic thinking or past thinking, and it pulls us from the present when we feel most connected and I think alive. And so anxious thoughts really are that over preparing and our brain giving us every possible thing that may, happen in the future, or ruminating and rehashing and trying to fill all the gaps of things that we might not be able to from our past. But it is our protective system.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a helpful way to think about it too, is that it gets a bad rap, and it can be helpful. And I think it sounds like it's just to a certain degree, right? It's helpful to prepare for something, but when you go too far into that preparation and over preparation, that's maybe that line where it crosses into anxiety, and then it's probably more hurtful than it is helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you make a great point with that, because anxiety too is a way that, anxious thoughts is there's a lack of self-trust, right? When we trust ourselves that we will be able to navigate the unknown, that we'll be able to access resources or talk to certain people or get information that we might be lacking. When we kind of trust that I may not have all the information, and rarely sometimes we do, but I trust that, based on past experiences and just past resilience that I've kind of stored up, that I will be able to navigate this. It might not be comfortable, might not be graceful, but I'll be able to get through that. And once we kind of have that shift, and once we start to kind of challenge and self-connect and really understand what those anxious thoughts are trying to protect us from, and really start to align with them and soothe them rather than shove them down and suppress them and band-aids over them, it's amazing how that can shift our whole thinking. And actually those protective parts of us start to calm down a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And one other area that I loved from your book, it was just like a one-liner that I'm curious if you have more thoughts to share on, is you mentioned that stress is like a cold and anxiety is like allergies. And I'd never heard that before. And that is really, I think, going to stick with me. And I'm probably going to use that with clients too, is that it's sort of like the one-off stressors of like a cold, like you can, it usually goes away after maybe the event or whatever it is. But the anxiety is allergies. I'm like, man, I have seasonal allergies and they're the worst, because they stick around. You can't seem to do too much around it, or, you can take medicine, but you might still feel it. So any other thoughts on like that differentiator there?
Yeah, I know. And I think that it's all about kind of that proactive approach, I think, especially with anxiety and allergies, right? And we can't nail it every time. We can kind of have little reminders in our calendar, like, hey, start taking that allergy medicine, or, hey, this is when you typically get symptoms of an increase. And anxiety or anxious thought patterns are typically the same when we actually can be proactive and we're very smart about our data and start anticipating certain triggers, right? We don't fear them. We don't try to completely erase them, but we're like, this may be coming. This is usually something that ignites me. Like, what are some things that I can do on the front end to get myself aligned, to build that self-trust, to kind of, take care of the basics and make sure that I'm well equipped, so that when I do go into this season, when I do go into this visit, when I do go into this chapter, I feel more ready. It's like running that marathon and never training a day before. It's like, ooh, good luck.
Yes, I love that. It's like identifying the anxiety triggers. It's similar with allergies again, of like, which pollen is it? Is it, is it the spring allergies? Is it fall? But like knowing that in advance and kind of doing that testing and experimenting and trying to learn from past behaviors too, to start to narrow it down. That's super helpful. So yeah, what are some other key ways that you help clients work through anxiety in their personal lives? Like, what are some of those things that we can do?
Yeah. Well, I think too, particularly with women, We're caretakers by nature, a lot of us, and we operate in kind of this 2 to 3 steps ahead modality where, we can generally with our friendships, our relationships, whether they're personal or professional, I think we're very savvy. We have high emotional intelligence overall. So we can read a room very quickly. We can read a face very quickly. We can read a tone very quickly. And I think where we misstep though, and this is kind of where our emotional intelligence does us dirty, is that we stay kind of in this 2 to 3 steps ahead mode. And this is where serial fixing kind of comes in. And you can see that when we are taking, kind of operating with 2 to 3 steps ahead, it's future based. It's kind of assessing, well, what does this person need from me? If I don't do this, are they going to then put me in this category or judge me this way? Or, did I fail this way? Am I good? Am I a good leader if I don't do this? Will people then categorize me? We go through all these cycles and kind of this self-talk. And you can see where that is future based. It's not fact based. Those are anxious thoughts and those are protective thoughts. And so oftentimes it's just highlighting that, especially for women that are high functioning. Are you grabbing things consistently and taking ownership of things that actually are not yours? And you see that when we operate in that way, we are living futuristically, even if it's just a few steps ahead. And that fuels anxiety. That fuels anxiety. And then we're allowing other people's fertile stressors, issues, problems kind of be our sole source of structure. And it makes us feel connected. It makes us feel worthwhile. It makes us feel, relevant. But you can see when we're on the hunt for that and operating that gear, there's very little room left for us. And that leaves us oftentimes in a very high state of urgency and perpetuates and fuels those anxious thoughts.
Wow. Yeah. So I definitely resonate with that. And I'm already thinking of several clients who we've had conversations similar to this. So where does someone start when they realize that they are, a few steps ahead all the time and they're thinking about everyone else, they're not thinking about themselves? Like, how can they start to reframe that or start to navigate that anxiety that they're bringing on themselves?
Right. And it's kind of just grabbing ownership of things very quickly with very little information and kind of putting it through your filters and your timelines. And it's kind of like that control disguised as compassion sometimes. Right. And so that's like hard to even hear. It's like, oh, God, it's like, but I think that sometimes when we are kind of controlling or when we are, nope, it's my way or the highway. We want to be efficient. We want to get things done. We know what's right for people around us, but we're also trying to protect discomfort within us. And so, I really talk a lot about, support, don't solve. When you're in relationships, professionally and personally, when you're in exchanges, really start collecting data on yourself. Do you hear a sigh? Do you hear someone say, oh my gosh, I have so much on my plate. I don't know how I'm going to prepare for that meeting. Or it's just, I can't seem to get through to this person. Do you immediately jump in to fix and solve? Do you immediately say, and it comes from a good place normally, but do you immediately say things like, well, let me email them, or let me just take that off your plate, or you know what, we can postpone the meeting, or you know what, tell me what I can do. We're already overextending and we're taking ownership. And the very first thing I tell high functioning people, especially women, is first and foremost, collect your data. Just understand, wow, I am jumping into most everything from the people I'm leading, my relationships, my children, and I'm a fixer and a solver. And so the first thing then after you've kind of collected that data and you come to that realization, which you're not alone and it's okay, is that's when you start first with just validation. That's when someone shares something with you like, oh gosh, this week is really challenging me, or I just have so much on my plate, or I feel stressed. Your first statement is to let that person know that you are trying very hard to understand the message and the emotion that are coming through verbally and non-verbally. So validation would be something like, oh, this week does sound like it's really been hard. Or no, that is a lot. Or just even kind of a concerning, like soft look of like, I think those things, it pauses us. It kind of helps us turn the other way than jumping into fixing and solving to soothe their discomfort and ultimately soothe ours.
Yeah, I love that idea of just pausing too, because it's usually probably such an automatic reaction that we have to just jump in and let me do this for you, let me offer something. And yeah, I think I'm what I've seen too with my clients too is that when they are kind of in this mode, it's almost ironic because we're usually doing it because we want to be connecting to other people. We want to be helping. We want to maybe deepen that connection with someone or help them, right? But then the irony is that usually you're almost like putting up a wall. I've found with other people, it's like you're almost keeping them at arm's length because you're just jumping in, and then they kind of take a back seat because they're like, oh, they're gonna jump in, they're gonna solve it. I don't have to kind of be involved anymore sometimes, so they're kind of maybe distancing themselves, I think, because they're seeing you jump in and solve everything for them. So they're like, oh, well, now I don't have to do anything. They're just going to do it for me. And it's like you're
Yes.
not doing it together. Now it's just like sometimes like steamrolling over someone else too.
You're absolutely right. And you can see, I mean, just based on what you said, how that just kind of fuels these micro codependencies. And where people do, you're absolutely right. It's like, oh, I have this tangled mess. Let me just talk to Brittany and throw this tangled mess to her because she will structure it and she will search it. And then I can, fill my plate with other things. Where cool, you might feel this sense of accomplishment. You might be like, oh, my team needs me. Look at all the things I'm doing. But that is a recipe for overextension, for burnout, for not having room or space to connect with yourself. And that too is something that I think very much so triggers kind of, resentment and also anxious thought patterns. And so it is, you're absolutely right. It's not allowing people to keep ownership of what's rightfully theirs while you still lead with empathy and compassion and you support. This isn't about just turning a cold shoulder, but you don't grab it and try to fix and solve because you know as well as I do, you probably have the best advice under the sun and know exactly what someone should do, but they are not going to do it if they don't have their own flavor added to it and their own ownership. The activation will not happen. And you will find yourself in consistently cyclical conversations with people that are frustrating.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I see a lot with my clients too. It's like that's where we either fall into some sort of micromanaging, or it's that really frustration of like, or that big frustration that people aren't taking ownership and they're like, wow, I have to hound this person to get them to do it. I have to remind them to do it. And you're still taking on so much of it. And it's because of that dynamic. And I always say to clients too, is that people treat you how you let them treat you. So it's one of those like you are creating this relationship because relationships are a two-way street. It's not that they're probably doing this with everyone. It's because of this dynamic. It's these automatic things that you're saying and how you're jumping in that has kind of led to this habit of how you're treating each other. And the good news is you can change it, right? We can choose to do something different, to say different things, and to support each other in a different way, and we can move past it. So there is hope.
And that's right. And that's where those boundaries come in. And boundaries, again, is the perfect thing you just kind of described is it's not then about trying to change the other person. It's you, again, collecting that data that like, I am getting so frustrated at this pattern of them saying they're going to complete a task and then they don't. And then I either step in and do it or it's delayed. And then I have to have a conversation. It's like, this is a pattern. And so what kind of boundaries are you going to set up in order to shift and have, some element of control in this pattern? And that's the true, that's when change happens. And that's when people then have to take ownership of things and feel natural consequences of things. And I mean, that's where it all starts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you had mentioned a little bit earlier about burnout. Like that's kind of that next layer of when we're maybe so stressed out or there's so much anxiety, it's kind of this like next level. How do you define burnout and how are you helping people within companies? Because I know you're doing a lot of speaking and workshops within companies. How are you helping more like teams and groups prevent that burnout and prioritize wellness?
Yeah. And it's such a heavy thing, right? Because it comes from, again, we're all kind of dealing with it in different ways and we all go home to different things. So it's not kind of this, scripted process. But I think burnout essentially, I mean, I think at this stage we've heard the word so much, which rightfully so. And I think many of us can regurgitate the symptoms of it, where it's just kind of that aloof feeling, that flat affect. It's hard to kind of ignite that motivation. It's hard to be present. You are kind of scrambling and looking for distractions and real-time soothing techniques. And it's just kind of this flat, it's just, that's kind of how I anticipate burnout. And it's kind of robotic. You just don't feel aligned and passionate about much of anything that you're doing. And I think the biggest, it's a major disconnect, right? We're disconnected from ourselves. We're disconnected from our roles, our tasks, and it's just blah. And I think that is a big culmination of disconnect that has happened previously, right? Not creating those times for us to check in, for us to have difficult conversations, for us to set boundaries. We've just kind of lived reactively, and we've let our internal balloon get to capacity. And then one more puff of air, we pop. And so it really is this kind of lack of maintenance, if you will, and kind of these lack of like, wow, this is the data. I'm not happy with this. This relationship is not working for me, but what am I going to do? I guess I'll just, fuel myself over here, and we avoid what's really happening.
Wow.
And so I think with companies and with teams in general, it's talking about what burnout is, what it feels like, but ultimately it's going deeper in the psychology behind the symptoms and like what's underneath it. And oftentimes, Brittany, it's those internal conflicts of, a part of us knows logically exactly what boundary we should set. And then the pleaser in us or the critic in us is like, oh, but if I do that, then people might not think this of me anymore. Then, well, and I don't want to cause drama, or I don't want to be seen as this, or I don't want to be this. So we kind of have this, self-narrative that almost kind of diffuses sometimes this part of us. Is that like, this is enough. And so we say stagnant. And so really what I try to educate people on and give them kind of this reframe with is understand what your competing two parts are motivated by and what they're trying to protect you from. And just another scenario, think about too, if you're just like, you know what, enough is enough. I'm in my 40s. I got to get healthy. I don't know why I haven't been consistently working out. I'm eating X, Y, and Z. That's enough is enough. And you have this grand plan on like Sunday morning that you're going to start your week with, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do this. And it might have this rigidity to it, but you're channeling through this part of you that wants to push you forward, that wants to fight back. Right. And then Monday morning, your alarm goes off a little earlier than normal to get that workout in. And there's another party that surfaces and says, yeah, but our bed is so warm and we didn't sleep well. And we don't sleep well. We do get actually more impatient with people. And, that's not how I want to lead. And that's not how I want to be. And really, is a morning workout going to do anything anyway? Maybe we'll just we'll kind of recalibrate all this. And you turn off your alarm. You're going to hear from that critical party later in the day being like, are you serious? Day one and you flop? Like, what's going on? That right there is an internal conflict. That right there is two parts of you trying to protect different things. The one that was the go-getter, trying to like prevent you from stagnation, really looking after your health, wanting you to, feel that confidence and everything when you achieve something that is for you. And the other part is protecting your peace, protecting your energy flow. But both of them, you got to find the gray zone. You have to meet and be the mediator between both of these parts. And that right there is what we're missing. We're doing it sometimes for everybody else, but we're forgetting to have that internal dialogue with ourselves.
Yeah, I love this perspective on burnout. I haven't heard it like that, where it's just this like ongoing kind of negotiation in our own heads that we keep kind of struggling with, and we keep kind of putting off the hard decision or the hard conversations or the things that we know are going to help us in the long term. It's like that daily negotiation we're having with our internal critic of like, oh, I want to do better, I want to do more, I want to be healthier. And then the fear jumps in and is like, well, yeah, like the bed is comfy and like it's easier right now to do the easy option or to avoid something, or sleep in. And it's like, yeah, when that builds up over time, that totally makes sense. That's when burnout comes in, of just you're almost like what I heard too and what you're saying. It's like this resignation of like you're kind of almost giving up a lot of yourself, what you want, your motivation, your excitement, your goals, and you're just kind of taking a back seat in your life. And it's not a choice. It's just almost like your body and your brain is just sort of like exhausted. It's like, I just can't make more decisions. I can't be excited about anything right now. I just need to go on like low energy mode, and I'm just going to go through the motions and just get things done that I need to and nothing more.
You nailed it. And you're right. The body and the mind are on our team. But if they don't trust that we're going to set certain boundaries and limits, you're absolutely right. They will just start to shut down to preserve energy, to preserve what little, they feel like we have left, which sounds very dark and doom, but that's really it. I mean, think if you go days without food, your metabolism starts to decrease. The body starts to respond to that. It's like, oh, we gotta hang on to all this that we have because we don't know what we're going to eat again. It's the same type of thing. So you start to feel these parts of you that were vibrant, that maybe you could access easily, they become dormant because they're taking up too much space, there's too much energy, and you're not replenishing it.
Yeah. And the other thing I'm realizing is that I think most people associate burnout simply with work, of like, oh, I'm just so busy at work and I've been so busy for 3 months or, months and months and months. And it's just now I'm in burnout, but it sounds like how we're talking about is it's way more than that. It's likely in your life that you're doing these. And again, it could be those little baby decisions you're making first thing in the morning when you're trying to get out of bed, or eating something healthy versus unhealthy. Like all of those little compromises and decisions we're making, I think, are also feeding into this burnout. It's not just, oh, you have a big project on your plate at work. It's probably going to be like 100 different things piling on, even if they're just like micro occurrences or micro decisions on a day-to-day basis.
You're absolutely right. And it's not about perfection and making sure that we are nailing everything and doing exactly the right thing. That's too much pressure. But you make such, with a good example with the big project. It's like, yes, big projects you're straining. They do generate stress. But if we go into that project with kind of, the basics covered, and we're being mindful of our sleep or how we prepare for sleep, we're being mindful of kind of what we're, using as maybe band-aids or vices and how that might be impacting us, and kind of, just the basics of being human. If those are lacking going into something that takes higher levels of energy, that's a lot. And if you're not also kind of tag teaming this with recovery time in the midst of the project, it's just not a good setup. And you are going to flatline in some ways and then have to totally regroup and regenerate everything.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I use this analogy a lot with clients too. It's like when we're charging our own batteries, and I think a lot of times people wait till it's at 0 and we're empty and we have no energy left, and then they try to recharge it. But I see burnout as more, you're in the negative and you're just trying then to get back to like a 0, and even that obviously is not going to sustain you. It's like we don't want to get down to 0 or negative. We need to consistently keep in the positive as much as possible. But yeah, I think that's when burnout comes in, is when we're just consistently pouring and giving away our energy, and we're never refueling it. Or even when we try to refuel, it just barely gets us up to 0, and then you're still working on that big project that's going to take more energy, and you're just instantly back in the negative, and it's like you're just like drowning and you can't save yourself.
That's right. And I found that the primary ingredient in burnout and cyclical burnout is fixing and solving. It's overextending. It's taking ownership of things that are not yours. It's jumping the gun. It's not, asking those follow-up questions. It's not asking, tell me more, or, what can I do to support you? It's just, again, grabbing the ownership, filtrating it through us, taking ownership, and then just grabbing things. And you can see that that's just a heavy load to carry all the time with, again, very little space done for us.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely the theme, it seems like, is that all of this is actually in our control. And I'm sure that's the last thing we want to hear, because it's so much easier to blame our boss and the big project and how cold it is outside and all of the things. But really, it's on us. So sorry to tell you, everybody, there's more that we can be responsible for and take ownership over. And the good news is it's going to help us, and we can make a difference. So, all right. So I know we've mentioned a few times this term serial fixer. So I want to circle back on that. I know that's your new book, and I've been reading it and loving it. And I mentioned a few times already. So highly recommend it for people. We'll put it in the show notes. But can you tell us more what this serial fixer term, first of all, what it means, and how you can tell if you're a serial fixer?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, serial fixing, it's kind of, and it generally comes from a good place. And these are generally people who have high levels of empathy, high levels of compassion. And so this isn't like a shame tactic. This is actually, you're not alone. I see this all the time. And so serial fixing is when you are in a conversation and interaction and you immediately jump in to fix and solve. And that's where in the book, I talk a lot about kind of those internal boundaries that need to happen, really sifting through those internal conflicts to understand the pleaser in you, the critic in you, the rescuer in you, and how that sometimes is preventing us from saying what we need to say, from setting a boundary, from pausing, from keeping ownership, with people as we support. And so there's those internal boundary work, and then really ultimately the external boundary work. And this is such a great, I think, concept for people, again, with high levels of empathy and compassion. And this is in the professional world, personal world, and it's all integrated, as we know. But it's just kind of this whole view of overextension, overfunctioning, burnout, and ways that we can, really get in touch with ourselves and change how we show up in relationships.
Yeah, it's fascinating too, and even just how you're describing it now, I think so many people can resonate, I'm sure, with this. And do you know why, or can you share more why we tend to do this? Because all of those examples seem like just this is just, how I am. Like I'm just compassionate. I care about people. Like, is there anything deeper to it, or how we can like kind of look a little bit deeper of like what's causing this?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is, when you kind of look at the role that had even as a young child and teen in your family structure.
Mm,
And if there was room for your emotions, if there wasn't room for your emotions, if you were kind of emotionally caretaking others at a very young age, and, maybe even again, your emotional intelligence at age 5, age 10, age 15, you were savvy. You could read, your parents, your siblings, whoever you grew up with. And, you were kind of in this fixing mode then of like, well, I should do this so that I don't, rustle any feathers, or I should do this so that I get that praise or I get that connection. And so you're already looking 2 to 3 steps ahead emotionally. And again, that's a wonderful skill, but you can see if that's not tag teamed with the same courtesy that, we've been giving that to ourselves, it just sets you up for living in kind of this 2 to 3 steps ahead mode. I also think for me, we have these, especially as women, kind of these very rigid definitions of what makes a good mother, of what makes a good leader, of what makes a good daughter, a good sister. And oftentimes, that involves, which is a strength, but involves that caretaking, that, making sure other people's needs are taken care of, because once they're good, then you can be good.
mhm.
And so we operate on that level, and you can see that just feels serial fixing. And so again, my goal is not to diffuse those strengths and to say, again, turn a cold shoulder and just like, well, that's yours, good luck. It's how do we lead with compassion and empathy and create space for people while keeping ourselves in the equation?
Wow, that's powerful. And again, it kind of goes back to this idea of these are all strengths, but when taken too far, just like with anxiety and over preparation, it's like it's so helpful to a point, and we need to understand what that line is for ourselves, or where is it actually costing you and not
Mhm.
helping you. And I think that's so hard to tell because it's almost like addicting because it feels so good, right? We're helping people, and I like to see people smile, or I want to help them not be so stressed. And but yeah, we're just putting other people's needs above our own, which is honestly never going to help us, right? And it's never going to
Yeah.
be sustainable long term. And I think that's what we forget. We're so focused on the present of helping someone else that we're not thinking about ourselves in the present. We're thinking, oh, someday I'll have time for myself, or oh, I'll just keep kicking that can to the future of taking care of myself. But it
And
doesn't
we
work like
really can have both, right? And I think that statement, and I know sometimes it's really hard to hear, and I have to tell myself this, and sometimes I cringe, but it's just that, Leah, is it control disguised as compassion?
that.
Are you trying, especially even with, my children, when they come to me with a problem or something, my first inclination sometimes is like, well, I'll email the teacher. Well, let me do this. Let me just figure it out. Let me just get this done so I can check this off my list, and then you're good and we can move on, because I got a million things circulating in my mind. But that right there is creating this little micro codependency. I'm neglecting my children the opportunity to get their reps in and problem solve. And you can see that, that too is also a lack of trust in them, right? Those that we lead, if we're jumping in to fix and solve and take ownership of things, we're also communicating to that person that like, yeah, I don't trust you to take care of this, or I don't trust that I'm going to be able to communicate it or access the level of patience to be able to let you figure it out. So I'm just going to do it. And that's oftentimes self-serving.
Right. And then we get frustrated when the other person doesn't want to take ownership. And then it's this cycle of starts all over again. And then we're again
Mhm.
frustrated at each other and just not helping each other out in a meaningful way.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. One more question about serial fixers is that I loved in the book. You have these three different types of serial fixers. Do you mind sharing at a high level what those three are? Because as I read it, I was thinking of specific people and clients, and like they fit in these different categories. And I love that there's kind of different um, styles of serial fixers, so we can get a little bit more granular on it too.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we think about kind of the doormat, right? I mean, that's kind of, you hear that and you're like, okay, like that's the one that I think that, they're prone to getting taken advantage of. They've kind of created and put out into the world at a very early stage that like, I am infinitely available. Right. And so it's kind of people, we're savvy. we can pick up. It's not manipulative. I don't think it by nature, but we can pick up on like, oh, she's got that. Oh, she'll structure that. Oh, they'll handle that. And I can kind of just, disassociate from that because they got it. And so I think that the doormat, again, is so disconnected, unfortunately, from themselves. And one of their main true motivations and why they find themselves in serial fixing patterns is to, kind of stay in the good graces, but also they're desperately seeking connection. They're desperately seeking kind of to be seen. But the way they're going about it is it keeps it surface. It keeps it completely imbalanced. And so it's kind of this struggle of like, I'm working so hard or I'm bending over backwards for everyone. And why is this not working? And I'm now resentful. And does that make me a bad person? It's just like these thoughts like that. That's kind of the doormat. And we have the saint who has some similarities with the doormat, but the saint is someone who's like, I do not want to ever be seen in a negative light, ever. I want everyone to like me. I want to be a good person every minute of every single day. And so you can see that like they will kind of swallow, the opportunity to speak up, to maybe say, this isn't working for me, or no, I'm not able to do that on Friday night. It's just like, I do not want people to ever think of me or categorize me as negative. So I am going to, again, accommodate. I'll endure, like, it's fine. And they typically don't have much of an opinion. Like they're very go with the flow, which a lot of people love. But then again, that shows this kind of disconnect of, I never really check in with what the hell I want. I just let everybody else structure me and I go along with the flow because again, my main goal is to always be seen as a good person. And so that too leaves them in the serial fixing pattern. And then we kind of have like the steamroller, which this is the person's typically that will, kind of have those anxiety driven controlling tendencies and kind of step in and grab ownership. And it's very blatant. It's very obvious. You might be sharing something and I go, oh, no, Brittany, that happened to me 3 years ago. And this is what I did. And this is what you should do. And you're like, oh, okay. I didn't even get my thought out. So it's kind of like, button it up. You be okay. I'm purposeful, right? You come to me. Yep. We figured it out. Good. Okay, great. Stamp that and let's move on. And so it's this urgency. It's this fixing to soothe themselves, but they want other people to feel soothed. But this happens a lot in leadership. This happens a lot with bosses, where they'll just immediately step in, they'll immediately take ownership. And then you can see where they're pulled in all different directions. They don't know how to delegate. They don't know how to, and that's the fixing part. And it's steamrolling.
Yeah. I love it. Those are great examples. And I'm like thinking about different people as you're describing these. I see this so often with people, and especially women, is like, we want to jump in and we want to be helpful. But also as you're describing this, and I have to say this to my clients all the time, it's like, that sounds exhausting. Like, could we just like not do all of this extra mental work and emotional work that we're putting on our own shoulders? And, it's like, sometimes we don't realize we're doing all of that until I say that to a client. They're like, wow, that is a lot. Like, could I not do it? I'm like, you don't have to. It's okay. Like,
is this sustainable?
Like, no wonder you're burnt out and exhausted and overwhelmed, and it's hard to navigate just going to the gym and things like that. It's like, yeah, you're putting a lot of extra weight on your own shoulders. So yeah, it's interesting to see it from those different angles too, or different styles of serial fixers. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this today and joining us today. This is, I feel like, a lot for us to digest in a great way of like, there's so much to learn here and so much to self-reflect on. So definitely, challenge the listeners to think about this for yourself. Are you a serial fixer? Maybe are you resonating with one of these three styles, or maybe the people you're working with or your leaders or people on your team? Maybe keep an eye out for this and see how maybe you need to have different conversations or set different boundaries in order to have more productive relationships and again, make it less exhausting for everyone. So how can listeners get in touch with you, or anything that you want to share specifically with them today?
Yeah, no, I'd love to connect. So you can find me, LinkedIn, Instagram, social channels. My website's leahmarone.com, where if you are interested in the book, there's, anywhere really you buy books, there's a link on there. But please do connect with me. And, if you are kind of listening to this and feel like, oh my gosh, I'm a serial fixer, again, it's not a bad thing. It's not a negative thing. It's just another set of data points. And there's ways to kind of, break free from that. And I'm happy to support, and I'd love to hear from you. So please do connect. I'm also on Substack trying that out, but yeah, you can find me a lot of places, and I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, it's definitely. And I know we're connected on LinkedIn, and I love seeing your posts on there too. So another quick plug there of connecting on LinkedIn, and we have a lot of posts from Leah that we can learn from as well. So yes, thank you again, Leah, for joining us today. Thank you to our listeners for joining today. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please like or subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcasting platform. It really helps new people find the podcast and in turn find the support that they're looking for as well. That's it for today. We'll see you in the next episode.